The little boy walked into the wedding alone, pointed at the bride in front of everyone, and asked the question that destroyed the entire church. "Why did you kill my mother?" The room fell silent so fast it almost felt unreal. 1 second earlier, people had been smiling. Phones were raised, champagne glasses lifted quietly between whispers and laughter. Then suddenly, nobody moved. The pianist near the altar slowly stopped playing mid-note. Evelyn felt the blood drain from her face, not because of the accusation, but because she recognized the little boy immediately. Before we start, if you love powerful African stories, filled with emotion, mystery, and real-life lessons, then make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what's coming next. And I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me, where are you watching from? And what time is it right now? Are you watching from the United States, Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom, South Africa, or somewhere else entirely? I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel across the world. Now, let's begin. Milo, the child she prayed would never find her. Nathan turned slowly beside her in confusion. "What is this?" But the boy was not looking at him. His small hands trembled at his sides while tears filled his eyes. Yet somehow, his voice remained steady. "My mother died because of you." A soft gasp escaped somewhere near the back of the church. Several guests lowered their phones awkwardly. Others immediately started whispering. Nathan stared at Evelyn in disbelief. "Do you know him?" Evelyn could not answer, because at that exact moment, she realized the past she spent 7 years running from had finally caught up with her. Milo slowly stepped farther into the church. His dark blue coat looked slightly too large for him, like it belonged to someone else. Maybe his father. Or maybe the last person who still cared for him. The thought hit Evelyn painfully. She had not seen him since the night Clara died. And somehow, he looked older now. Not physically. Emotionally. Like childhood had left him too early, and what filled the space it vacated was something heavier. Something that belonged to adults who had learned that the world was not always a safe or honest place. A woman near the front pew leaned toward another guest and whispered something behind her hand. Nathan looked between Milo and Evelyn once more, his voice lower now, more serious. "Evelyn, answer him." But Evelyn still could not speak, because memories had already started returning. Rain against hospital windows, Clara crying, a broken coffee cup on the kitchen floor, the smell of antiseptic and new life, and one sentence she had spent 7 years wishing she could forget forever. "If anything happens to me, promise me you will protect my son." Milo pointed directly at Evelyn again. "You promised my mom you would not leave her alone." The church became even quieter after that. If silence could have texture, this one would have been made of glass, thin and cold and breakable, and already broken. Nathan's expression changed, confusion slowly becoming concern, then concern becoming something that looked a great deal like fear. "What is he talking about?" Evelyn finally forced herself to breathe. Her wedding dress suddenly felt unbearably heavy around her chest. Because the terrifying part was not the accusation itself. The terrifying part was that Milo believed every single word he was saying. And somewhere deep down, in the place inside Evelyn that never went quiet, no matter how many good days came and went, a part of Evelyn believed she deserved it too. Evelyn Adeyemi had been planning this day for exactly 2 years. 2 years of venue deposits and dress fittings and seating chart arguments that ended in laughter. 2 years of early mornings and late evenings building something real with a man who loved her in the steady, unhurried way of someone who had decided she was worth the patience. Nathan Ashford had proposed on a rainy Tuesday evening over takeout curry. Not with flowers. Not with a restaurant booking and a hidden ring in a champagne flute. With a handwritten letter. 3 pages, front and back, in his careful architect's handwriting that leaned slightly to the right as if the letters themselves were always trying to get somewhere. Because he said flowers die, and he wanted her to have something she could read again on the days she forgot why she had chosen him. Evelyn had kept that letter inside the cover of a journal she carried everywhere. She read it the night before the wedding, sitting alone in the hotel room after Priscilla and Amara had finally gone to their own rooms past midnight. She sat for a long time after she finished reading it, holding those pages in her hands, thinking about everything that had been and everything that was about to begin. This is it, she thought. This is the life. The one that starts today and leaves everything behind. Everything behind. She had been telling herself that for 7 years, that the past was finished, that what happened to Clara at the lake house was a tragedy, terrible, senseless, irreversible, and that tragedies end and people who survive them are allowed to move forward. She had told herself that so many times, that most days she almost believed it. On the best days, she believed it completely. On the worst days, she could feel the shape of the lie pressing against the inside of her chest, like something that had never properly healed. But today was supposed to be a best day. The hotel room was golden with morning light when her maid of honor Priscilla woke her with tea and a plate of the small chin pastries Evelyn had loved since childhood. Her younger sister Amara sat cross-legged at the foot of the bed, eating strawberries with the focused contentment of someone determined to enjoy every part of a day that was not technically even about them. "Nothing can go wrong today," Amara said, pointing a strawberry at the ceiling for emphasis. "That is not how probability works," Evelyn said. "I am not talking about probability. I am talking about the universe having good manners for once." Evelyn laughed. Priscilla handed her the tea. The morning moved through hair and makeup, and the careful choreography of 3 women who loved each other enough to say the hard things while still making everything feel light. Amara told the story of how Evelyn had once shown up to their parents' anniversary dinner wearing shoes from 2 completely different pairs and claimed it was intentional until the photographs came back. Priscilla reminded Evelyn of the conference room where she had first seen Nathan from across a corridor and pretended to be on a phone call that was not happening in order to have an excuse to stay near him. Evelyn told both of them to stop immediately and meant neither. The dress went on at 11:45. It was the color of first light, that particular white that leans toward ivory, warm rather than cold, generous rather than stark, simple at the back. The kind of dress that does not need to announce itself because it trusts the person inside it to carry it. Evelyn stood in front of the full-length mirror and looked at herself for a long moment. Amara covered her mouth. Priscilla said nothing, which from Priscilla was the highest possible compliment. The car arrived at 12:30. St. Augustine's Church sat on a quiet residential street 6 blocks from the park where Nathan had once taken Evelyn on a second date so disastrously that neither of them mentioned it for 3 months, and then brought it up at the same time and laughed so hard they were slightly embarrassed. The street outside the church was lined with guests making their way inside. Women in their best fabric and head wraps and heeled shoes, men in suits and agbada and the occasional impressive hat. 300 people who had come to witness something being made official. Evelyn sat in the car for a moment after it stopped. She could hear the music from inside, something soft and classical, something chosen months ago from a shortlist Nathan had put together with the care he brought to everything. She thought about the letter. She thought about the jollof rice dinners and the bad films on Friday evenings and the way Nathan always made her tell him about the best part of her day before he told her about his. She thought, this is real, and it is good, and today it becomes permanent. She stepped out of the car. Amara and Priscilla arranged her train. The church doors opened. 300 people turned. Nathan was at the altar. He looked at her the way he had looked at her at that second date, when things had gone wrong enough to be funny, and he had looked at her laughing at the situation and decided something in that moment. She could see it. She had always been able to see it. She started walking. She was 30 steps down the aisle when the side doors at the far end of the church opened. The ones that led from the car park, the ones that should have been locked. And Milo walked in, alone, in a coat that did not fit, with a silver key in his pocket. And 7 years of his mother's truth burning quietly in his chest. To understand why a 9-year-old boy walked alone into a church full of strangers on a Saturday afternoon and asked a bride whether she had killed his mother, you first need to understand who Clara Ose was, because everything that happened, everything that was still going to happen before this day was over, started with her. Clara was the kind of person who changed a room just by walking into it. Not because she was loud, though she could be, at volumes that occasionally alarmed people who did not know her. Not because she was beautiful, though she was, in the particular way of someone so completely at ease in themselves that the physical beauty becomes almost secondary to the energy. But because she was completely, entirely herself, in a way that made everyone around her feel slightly more alive just by proximity. Like standing next to someone who runs warm. You do not always notice it immediately. But you notice when they leave. Evelyn met her at a financial compliance seminar in London, one of those gray Tuesday afternoon events in a conference center where everyone is wearing lanyards and carrying terrible coffee and quietly wishing they were somewhere else. The presenter was explaining the finer points of cross-border transaction reporting with the energy of someone who has given the same presentation so many times they have stopped being able to tell whether the audience is following or has simply decided to accept the confusion and move on. And Clara laughed. Not a polite, under-the-breath laugh. A full, genuine, completely unabashed laugh that turned half the room around to look at her. And then she laughed even louder at the fact that they had all turned. Completely unashamed, completely amused at the entire situation, including herself. Evelyn wanted to know her immediately. They were friends within the week, best friends within 6 months. Clara was a private financial accountant, not the corporate kind who processed numbers in a system, but the kind hired when people needed someone who could find the story inside the numbers. She was brilliant at it. The kind of mind that sees connections between things other people look at separately. She used to say that numbers tell the truth, even when people refuse to. That you could understand everything important about a person, a company, or a family by watching what they did with money when they believed nobody was paying close attention. Evelyn used to tease her about it, used to say she spent too much time looking at spreadsheets and not enough time looking at people. Clara would say that spreadsheets were people. Every transaction was a decision, and every decision told you something. That instinct, that sharp, relentless honesty with numbers and the truths they carried was the thing that eventually got her killed. But back then, in the good years, Evelyn just knew her as the woman who brought jollof rice when you were sick and texted 3 paragraphs of thoughts at 2 a.m. because she could not sleep on an idea. The woman who bought fabric she loved, even when she had nowhere to wear it, because she said beautiful things deserve to exist in the world, regardless of occasion. And the woman who held Milo out to Evelyn in the hospital corridor the morning after he was born, still in the thin hospital gown, stitches and all, not caring, remotely, and said, "Say hello to the person who is going to cause you more trouble than you are currently imagining." And laughed at her own joke with the whole of her. Evelyn was there the day Milo was born. She had been there for the entire night of it, 22 hours of labor that Clara approached with the same combination of determination and dark humor she brought to everything. She was the first person outside the hospital room. She held Milo before his own grandmother did. And she made a promise that day. Standing in a corridor that smelled of antiseptic and new life, holding a baby who weighed almost nothing, looking at this woman she loved, in the uncomplicated way you love people who have become necessary to your own understanding of yourself. She promised that she would always be there. She said it out loud. She meant it completely. She kept it for 3 years. And then, on the night of the storm, at the end of a road that led to a lake house, with rain coming down so hard the road ahead was barely visible, she did not keep it. 7 years later, a boy with his mother's eyes was standing in the middle aisle of St. Augustine's Church, and the promise that had gone unkept was finally asking to be accounted for. To understand why Clara died, you have to understand what she found. And to understand what she found, you have to understand the Ashford family. Old money, property, private equity, and a name attached to charitable foundations for 2 generations. The kind of wealth that is comfortable enough with itself to be quiet about it. No flashy logos, no loud parties, just a name that opened doors before you had even knocked. Nathan's father, Richard Ashford, had built most of it. He had taken an already prosperous family business and expanded it across 3 continents over 30 years through genuine business acumen and the kind of old-school networking that happens in rooms requiring both a tie and a specific surname. Richard was also known for his philanthropy. The Ashford Foundation for Youth Development, the Ashford Community Trust, awards, plaques, a scholarship program at 2 universities. Richard Ashford, by every public account, was a man of substance and conscience. He had been dead for 5 years by the time Evelyn met Nathan. And in 2 years of building a relationship with his son, Evelyn had carefully, deliberately, never asked too many questions about him. Not because she was not curious, because she was afraid of where the answers might lead. Clara had been hired 3 years before her death as a private accountant for a group of subsidiary companies and charitable foundations connected to Richard Ashford's estate. Her contract covered cross-company financial reporting, reconciling accounts across a network of entities, ensuring the records were clean, the filings accurate, the numbers telling the same story in every direction. Clean, professional, legally uncomplicated. Except Clara noticed something almost immediately. A pattern in the transfer records. Foundation A receiving donations from a long list of private donors. Foundation B taking a portion of Foundation A's funds labeled as administrative processing fees. Foundation C receiving operational grants from Foundation B. Each transaction, looked at in isolation, was unremarkable. Standard charitable accounting. Organizations sharing overhead costs. Looked at together. Traced across 12 months, cross-referenced against the actual operational activity of each foundation. They described something else entirely. A loop. Money entering the system as charitable donations. Money cycling through administrative structures that left only the barest trail of genuine activity. Money re-entering the system through a different door, slightly altered in label. Clara flagged it internally. Nothing happened. She flagged it a second time 2 months later, with specific account references attached. This time the file containing her original flagged items disappeared from the shared system. Not archived, deleted, and the man she reported to stopped returning her calls. Clara called Evelyn that evening. Milo was 3 months old, asleep in his bouncer on the sofa beside her. Evelyn was at her own kitchen table eating toast and answering emails. She still remembered the exact quality of Clara's voice when the call connected. She had heard Clara frightened before. She had never heard her like this, controlled on the surface. Barely. The files are gone, Evelyn. Not misplaced, not archived, deleted, and nobody is asking what happened to them. Evelyn told her she was overthinking it. That files get reorganized, that systems have issues. She said all the sensible things. She was wrong. Over the following months, Clara dug deeper, quietly, methodically. In the hours after Milo was asleep, she cross-referenced foundation records against charity commission filings and company house records going back 12 years. She made charts on paper by hand because she did not trust anything that lived on a shared server. And what she found grew, step by step, from suspicious to disturbing to genuinely horrifying. The foundations had almost no operational substance, no genuine employed staff in any programmatic roles, no evidence of real beneficiaries, no service evaluations, just money flowing in and money flowing out through accounts connected to names that appeared in completely different databases. Databases connected to missing persons investigations, specifically missing children. Cases that had been opened with urgency and then, in ways that were difficult to articulate but impossible to ignore, closed without real resolution. In jurisdictions where official paperwork moved unusually fast. Where official interest cooled unusually quickly. Where families who had been promised answers were quietly redirected toward acceptance. Where children had simply vanished and the machinery that should have kept looking seemed to quietly, collectively, agree to stop. Clara built a timeline. She cross-referenced financial transfers against the dates of case closures. She found correlations she could not explain away. Money moving within weeks of investigations being suspended. Funds arriving in accounts held by names that appeared on public record as officials connected to those investigations. It was circumstantial. Clara knew that. But the weight of the circumstance was staggering. One evening, she arrived at Evelyn's flat with a folder thick enough to use as a doorstop. She spread the papers across the kitchen table, while Milo slept in the car seat she had carried up 2 flights of stairs without asking for help. And she stood there, hands flat on the table, looking at what she had built. Not crying, shaking. The particular tremor that moves through a person when the mind has finally understood something the rest of the body is refusing to accept. This is not tax fraud. Her voice was completely steady. This is not financial irregularity. This is money being used deliberately and repeatedly to protect people who are making children disappear. Evelyn looked at the papers. She looked at the names. She looked at the dates beside children who were no longer anywhere. And her stomach turned to ice because she recognized one of the foundation names on that table. She had seen it framed on the wall of Nathan Ashford's office 6 months earlier, a polished charitable donation plaque. The kind wealthy families display the way other people display family photographs. She had glanced at it and thought nothing of it at the time. Now it was on Clara's kitchen table, connected to the names of children who had never come home. "You need to go to the police," Evelyn told her. Clara looked at her with the expression of a woman who had already had this conversation with herself 10,000 times. "You do not understand what this family can do," she said. That sentence. Evelyn had carried it for 7 years, and standing at the altar of St. Augustine's Church right now, Nathan's hand cold in hers, Margaret rigid in the front pew, Milo's dark eyes steady on her face, Evelyn finally completely understood. Clara was not being dramatic. She was telling her the exact truth about the family whose name was on that plaque, about the family Evelyn was about to officially join, and the silence Evelyn had chosen after Clara died was not just cowardice. It was a choice she had made every single morning for 7 years. And now she was going to have to live with the consequences of it in front of 300 witnesses. Milo reached into his coat pocket. He removed a photograph. Old, or at least it felt old in the way things feel when they have been handled many times by someone who needed to feel connected to what was inside them. The edges were soft and curved from being slid in and out of a pocket. The corners slightly worn. The colors faded gently toward warmth, the way photographs shift when they have been loved enough to live in someone's hands, rather than safely behind glass. He walked it directly to Nathan, not to Evelyn, to Nathan, said nothing, just stood in front of the man at the altar and held it out. Nathan took it. And Evelyn watched Nathan Ashford's face. A face she had studied across 2 years of dinners and early mornings and long evenings. A face she knew the way you know the layout of a room you have lived in long enough to move through in complete darkness. She watched that face collapse. Not dramatically, not all at once, the way a building collapses when something fundamental fails. A quiet internal settling that begins in the load-bearing places before the rest catches up. Because the photograph showed Evelyn, 7 years younger, wearing a blue dress she had bought from a market in Brixton and never found a replacement for. Smiling a smile she had not worn since. Standing beside a woman with close-cropped natural hair and a bright yellow dress. The kind of yellow that announces itself in a room, with an expression that was somewhere between joy and laughter, the border invisible because she felt both at once. Clara, and bundled in Evelyn's arms, wrapped in a white hospital blanket with a small knitted cap, was a newborn baby. Milo, hours old, receiving the world for the first time. Evelyn was holding him like he was already hers to protect. Nathan looked up slowly. The bewilderment of someone who has been operating on a set of understood facts and has just been shown evidence that at least one of those facts was not true. "You told me you never knew her personally," he said. Quiet words, but they carried the full weight of 2 years of a relationship, 2 years of conversations about their pasts, their families, their histories. The specific weight of one deliberate omission that had been there the whole time. The bouquet in Evelyn's hands became suddenly unbearably heavy. "I lied," Evelyn said. It came out before anything careful could be constructed around it. Raw and flat and completely finished with the energy it takes to protect a secret. She was not just someone I knew. She was my best friend. For almost 3 years. Several guests near the front had stopped pretending they were not listening. Milo's voice was quiet when he spoke again. "You stopped answering our calls after she died." That sentence was somehow worse than the accusation had been. The accusation felt like anger, something hot. This felt like grief. The quiet, patient, long-carried grief of a child who had been waiting years for someone to explain why the phone stopped being answered. Not demanding answers, just stating what happened. "When did his mother die?" Nathan asked. 7 years ago. "And you never told me?" "Not once in 2 years? I told myself it was not relevant, that it was the kind of thing people carry privately." A dead friend is not something you carry privately from the person you plan to marry. He was right. Evelyn had no argument, because it was true. She had pressed the weight of Clara's death down below the surface of her life every single day for 7 years, telling herself it was protection, telling herself it was necessary. And now a 9-year-old boy with a faded photograph had dismantled every brick of it in under 5 minutes, in front of 300 people, in a church, on her wedding day. It was the moment Evelyn said Clara's full name out loud. Not just Clara. Clara Osei. That was the moment everything shifted. Because the instant those 2 words moved through the air, the full name, the real name, the name that connected this little boy to all of his history, something happened in the front pew that made every nerve in Evelyn's body fire at once. Margaret Ashford stiffened. The most composed woman Evelyn had ever known. A woman who had entered every room she had ever occupied, as though the room itself had been waiting for her arrival. A woman who had spent 4 decades controlling every social situation through a combination of perfect manners, perfectly timed warmth, and an absolute unwillingness to be caught off balance. Her spine straightened a fraction of an inch. Her manicured fingers tightened around the handbag in her lap. One small, controlled, barely visible movement. Less than a second. Most of the 300 people in that church missed it entirely. Evelyn did not. Milo did not. Because the little boy, for the very first time since he had walked through those doors, turned away from Evelyn and looked directly at the woman in the front pew. "You remember my mom?" Not a question. A certainty. The flat, uncomplicated certainty of a child who had been watching faces all his life and had learned to trust what he could see. Margaret's smile arrived immediately. Warm. Polished. "I think you are confused, sweetheart." The word sweetheart was chosen with care. The word adults use when they want to reduce the authority of what a child has just said. "No, I am not." 2 words, no pause, no apology, no adjustment for Margaret's tone. The church went absolutely quiet. Nathan looked at his mother, then at Evelyn, then at the boy, then back at his mother. "Do you know this child?" "No," Margaret said. Then she added, and this was the mistake, the tiny fracture in the composure that cracked everything open. "I only recognize the name Clara from years ago." Years ago. Not. "I do not know a Clara." Not. "The name means nothing to me." Years ago. An admission wrapped in a denial so quickly that she may not have noticed she had made it. Evelyn caught it immediately. Milo caught it immediately. And Milo reached into his coat again. This time what he removed was a small silver key. Worn smooth. Unremarkable to anyone who did not know what it opened. But the moment Margaret's eyes landed on it, the color left her face. Not dramatically. The specific way that color leaves a face when something a person has hoped would never surface suddenly appears, small and ordinary and utterly devastating in the hands of a child. "My mom said this proves who killed her," Milo said. He looked at Evelyn when he said it. "She said you would know what it opens." And Evelyn did. She knew exactly. Clara had mentioned a storage locker once, rented under a name that was not her own, in a facility chosen because it was quiet and slightly out of the way. She called it her insurance policy. "Just in case," she said. "Everything I have found, everything I have documented, everything that disappears from the shared servers, it goes in there. Physical copies, originals where I have them." Evelyn had thought she was being paranoid. The way you think someone is being paranoid when you are not yet ready to believe the thing they are preparing for. She had been wrong. Everything Clara had done was right. It had just taken 7 years, and a 9-year-old boy walking into a wedding to prove it. Evelyn made herself speak. Not because it was easy. Not because she was ready. Because there was no version of this day that ended in anything other than the full truth. Not with Milo standing there. Not with that photograph still in Nathan's hand. Not with the silver key. not with Margaret's face still drained of its practiced color. The truth had been in the room from the moment those side doors opened. It had simply been waiting for the person who owed it the most to stop pretending otherwise. So Evelyn spoke. Standing at the altar in a white dress that no longer belonged to the occasion it had been made for, in a church of 300 people who had come expecting one kind of story and were going to leave carrying a completely different one, she told them everything. She told them about the foundations and the financial loops. She told them about the names connected to missing children investigations that had opened with urgency and closed without answers. She told them about the evening Clara spread papers across her kitchen table and stood there shaking with a clarity that looked exactly like courage. She told them about the phone calls that started coming late at night. Calls with no voice on the other end. About cars that appeared outside Clara's building in the evenings and did not move until morning. About documents that vanished from Clara's office systems without explanation. About Milo growing from a newborn to a toddler while his mother worked in the hours he was asleep. Building the most important case of her career in the only space available to her. The church did not whisper, it went completely still. Nathan looked like he had been struck. His mother looked like she was deciding whether to run. And then Evelyn reached the part she had never told anyone. Not Priscilla. Not Amara. Not the therapist she had seen twice in the year after Clara died and then stopped going to because she could not find a version of the truth she was willing to say out loud. Not Nathan. Not once in 7 years. The night of the storm. It was a Saturday, Evelyn said. There had been a storm building over the city all day. The kind that settles in and refuses to move on. By evening it was raining hard. Clara called me at 7:30. She sounded different. Not the frightened I had heard before. Urgent. Active. She said she had copied the most important files onto a backup drive, and she needed someone she trusted to help her get them out. To a lawyer, to a journalist, to anyone outside the reach of the people involved. She called you to the lake house, Nathan said. Yes. I drove most of the way. The storm was worse than forecast. The road to the lake house was a single lane, and the rain was heavy enough that visibility was difficult. I slowed down when I turned into the final stretch. She breathed, and I saw a car parked outside. Whose car? Nathan asked. His voice was very quiet. The quietness of someone who has already begun to understand. Your father's. The church produced a collective sound. Small. Involuntary. Like something that could not quite be contained. I knew it because I had seen it parked outside your family estate 18 months earlier. The license plate, the model, the specific shade of dark green that reads almost black in poor light. It was your father's car, parked outside the house where Clara was waiting for me. Nathan sat down, slowly. The way people sit when their legs make the decision before their mind does. Clara had apparently called him before she called me. She believed that if she confronted Richard directly, gave him the full scope of what she had found, offered him the chance to cooperate with investigators in exchange for protection, he might take it. She was trying to give him a way out. She looked at Nathan. She was that kind of person. Even at the end, even frightened, she was still looking for the version of events where not everyone got destroyed. And my father was there. Yes, and someone else. A second car I did not recognize. The voices I could hear through the storm had shifted from conversation to argument. And then my phone rang. It was Clara. She was crying. The real kind. The kind from panic and desperation and the understanding that things had moved beyond the plan. She said someone else had arrived. That she was frightened, that she needed me inside right now. And you went in, Nathan said. The words came out like an assumption. Like something he was saying to prepare himself for the answer rather than because he believed it. No. The word fell into the church like something dropped from a great height. Clean and final. I did not go in. Milo's breath changed. Quiet. The sound of a child receiving the confirmation of the worst thing they had ever been told. I was afraid, Evelyn said. There was a car I did not recognize. Clara sounded more frightened than I had ever heard her. And I made the most cowardly decision of my entire life. I told her I was calling the police. I told her to get to a room with a door she could lock. And then? She stopped. I turned my car around. I drove away. The silence after that was the heaviest thing Evelyn had ever experienced. It had a texture and a temperature. It was cold. Did you call the police? Yes, immediately, from the road. And, by the time they arrived, the house was empty. The cars were gone. Clara was found in the lake the following morning, face down, 20 meters from the bank. The investigation concluded accidental drowning. Case closed in 3 weeks. She looked at Milo directly. But she was not careless. She was not reckless. She was running, trying to reach her car with the backup drive. She did not go near that water by accident. But you left her alone, Milo said. Yes. Evelyn looked at him. Not away. At him. And there has not been a single night in 7 years where that was not the last thing I thought about before I fell asleep. Margaret had not said a word in several minutes. For a woman who had spent 40 years controlling every room she entered with precisely placed words, this silence was extraordinary. She sat in the front pew, with both hands pressed flat against her handbag, looking at a point somewhere between the floor and the middle distance. Like a woman who has been waiting for a particular door to open for 7 years, and now that it has finally opened, is no longer sure she has the strength to walk through it, but also no longer able to pretend the door is not there. Milo was watching her. He had been watching her since before he spoke her name. Children watch things adults miss. Adults have learned to perform composure, which means directing attention to the right places, which means missing the things happening at the edges. Milo had no composure to perform. He just watched. My mom used to cry after talking to you, he said, directly to Margaret. No preamble. The church held its breath. She would get off the phone and sit at the kitchen table and not say anything for a long time. And then she would pick me up and hold me very tightly, like she was checking that I was still there. Something moved across Margaret's face. Not guilt exactly. Something that had been compressed into a very small space for a very long time and was beginning to expand because the pressure could no longer hold it. She was afraid of you, Milo said. Nathan looked at his mother. His voice was entirely quiet when he spoke. Mother, you knew Clara. Not a question, not an accusation. A statement of fact given to her as an opportunity, the last one, to choose the kind of person she was going to be from this point forward. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. She looked at her son, then at Milo. Then she closed her eyes briefly. The kind of closing that happens when a person makes a decision they have been postponing. And when she opened them, something had changed. The composure was still there, but the part underneath it was visible now. Yes, she said. The word fell into the church like something held in a closed fist for far too long and finally released. Tell me, Nathan said, and Margaret did. She told him about Richard, a man who had made one bad decision and found himself inside a set of relationships that kept narrowing. People who gave him access. People who created opportunities that came without any visible price tag for long enough that by the time the price appeared, the exit was no longer simple. He did not understand initially the full extent of what the foundations were being used for, Margaret said. He told himself it was aggressive tax planning. He told himself it was a gray area. When did he stop being able to tell himself that? When he found out about the children. Nathan said nothing. By the time he understood the full picture, he had been complicit long enough that cooperation would have meant explaining his own role, his own signatures, his own name on documents he had signed without fully reading. Margaret looked at her hands. He was not a brave man, Nathan. He was a man who made a terrible choice and then made every subsequent choice in the shadow of it. He went to the lake house to negotiate, Nathan said. He went because Clara called him and gave him the chance to be the person he had always told himself he was. Margaret's voice was barely holding. He went intending to offer her something that would protect her and allow him to extract himself. And someone else had already arrived. Who? Margaret looked at her son, with the expression of a woman about to hand someone something she knows will break him. Your uncle, she said, Charles. Nathan went completely still. The name landed with the weight of a name that explains things. That makes patterns suddenly legible. That closes doors that had seemed open while simultaneously opening others that had always been locked. My uncle who moved overseas 6 years ago. Margaret looked at her hands. Yes, she said. About that. Detective Ian Warren stepped forward from his position near the side entrance. He had been standing there for several minutes, a gray-coated man in his mid-50s with a thick manila folder under one arm and reins still dark on his shoulders, waiting with the patience of someone who has spent 7 years building toward this room. He had received a tip 3 days ago. Anonymous, brief, containing a time, a date, a name, and the words, "The storage locker matters more than the wedding." He had driven past this church 4 times that morning. Then Milo had walked through the side doors, and Warren had followed him. Charles Ashford, Warren said, never left this country. The room absorbed this. He did not emigrate. He moved into a property 30 miles north of this city under a name that was not his own, 7 years ago, 1 month after Clara Osei was found dead. Warren opened the folder. I have records of 14 properties accessed under 3 different identities, all within 2 hours of this city. He has never been further than that. Nathan turned to his mother. You knew? Yes. You told me he was overseas. Yes. And you knew where he actually was. Yes. Nathan stood. He walked to the end of the pew. He stood facing the window for a moment, then turned back. How long have you been investigating this? Nathan asked Warren. Since the morning Clara's body was found, Warren said. The official case closed in 3 weeks. Accidental drowning, insufficient evidence. I was assigned to the original investigation. I closed the file because I was instructed to. I kept it open privately, on my own time, because the official closure felt wrong from the first day I stood at that lake. Why didn't you move sooner? Because I had patterns, circumstantial connections. A woman documented as frightened in the weeks before she died, and a drowning ruled accidental with unusual speed. He looked at Milo. I needed what she left behind. Every head in the church turned toward the boy. Milo was still holding the silver key, still turning it in his fingers. My mom told me, Milo said quietly, that the key would tell the truth, even if everybody lied. Your mother was right, Warren said. She was right about a great many things. Milo's jaw tightened slightly, the way a child's jaw tightens when they are proud of someone and devastated by the same breath. She said to find the woman in the photograph and give her the key and tell her it is time. He looked at Evelyn. She said you would know what to do. And for the first time since Milo had walked through those church doors, past the accusation, past the photograph, past the storm's worth of truth that had come pouring out, he looked at Evelyn, not with anger, with something that was almost trust. The fragile, enormous trust of a child who has been told by his mother that despite everything, despite the leaving, despite the silence, despite the 7 years, the woman at the altar was not a bad person. She was a frightened one. And frightened people sometimes find their way back. Warren reached into the folder. He removed a small evidence bag. Inside it was a digital voice recorder, old model, water damaged. Its casing discolored and warped in the particular way of objects that have survived submersion but not emerged unchanged. The screen was dead. The charging port corroded, but the storage card inside had survived. Milo looked at it. His breathing changed. That was my mom's, he said. We recovered it from the lake, Warren confirmed. Found by a diver 4 months after her death. It was submitted as recovered property and sat in an evidence archive for 6 years because the official case was already closed and nobody was looking for it. Until you were, Nathan said. Until I was. Warren placed a small Bluetooth speaker on the pew beside the folder. He connected his phone to it. He had the storage card's contents on his phone, had been carrying the file for 11 months, had listened to the recovered portion more times than he could count, had used it as both evidence and fuel every time the investigation felt like it was going nowhere. He pressed play. Static first, long and shapeless. Then rain. Real storm rain. Heavy, relentless, filling the recording with white noise that made everything else feel smaller. A door. Footsteps on a wooden floor. Then voices, muffled at first, like conversation heard through a wall. Then, clearly, heartbreakingly clearly, Clara. 7 years. And her voice sounded exactly the same. The cadence, the slight upward rise at the end of every sentence. The voice that had called at 2 a.m. with an idea that could not wait. The voice that had laughed at a compliance seminar and changed a room. People are disappearing, and you expect me to stay quiet? Evelyn pressed her hand flat against her mouth. A man's voice responded. Older, flat, the kind that has never needed volume, because the power behind it has always been sufficient. You saw things that were never meant for you. The rain intensified on the recording. Another voice, tighter with fear. Margaret's. Please, just give them what they want. This does not need to go further. Nathan closed his eyes. Clara again, and there was steel in it, real steel, the kind in a person who has already calculated the worst outcome and decided to speak anyway. If anything happens to me, Milo goes public with everything. Every name, every transfer, every case, everything. Milo made a sound, small and fierce and involuntary. The sound of a child hearing their own mother fight for them from 7 years in the past, hearing her say his name, hearing that she used him, used the fact of him, turned her love for him into armor, and used it. A crash on the recording, footsteps, louder, faster. Then a door. Then Clara's voice, sharp with genuine terror. Then a third voice, different from the others, older still, colder. The voice of a man who has already made his calculations and arrived at his conclusions and is no longer interested in conversation. No child survives if this story gets out. The recording cut off, static. Then silence, complete and absolute. The church sat in that silence for a long time. That voice, Nathan said, barely a whisper. The third voice, that was not my father. No, Warren confirmed. That was Charles Ashford. Milo looked up at Evelyn, tears running quietly down his face. He said no child survives, Milo said. He was talking about me. Evelyn pulled him against her without thinking, the way she should have held him years ago. He was afraid of what you represented, she said quietly. And everything your mother built, everything she hid and protected and made sure you would know how to find, that is why he lost. Milo did not pull away. Evelyn changed out of her wedding dress in the hotel bathroom. Dark coat, plain dress. She left the veil on the hook behind the door, left the lilies on the bathroom counter, left the carefully constructed idea of the day in the mirror. Priscilla stood in the corridor without asking questions, without filling the silence with anything. Just being the particular kind of presence that does not try to manage grief. The kind that simply does not leave. Evelyn came out of the bathroom. I have to go, she said. I know, Priscilla said. This is not what you planned for today. Neither is any of the rest of it. Go. The storage facility was 40 minutes from the church. It sat near the waterfront. Old, slightly overlooked, the kind of building that survives decades by becoming part of the landscape rather than drawing attention to itself. Warren drove, Nathan rode in front. Milo sat beside Evelyn in the back. Margaret had been left at the church in the care of Warren's colleague, at her own request, quietly, without resistance. She said she needed to sit for a while. Nobody argued. The storm that had been threatening all day was now fully overhead. Rain against the glass, the lights of shops and street lamps smearing in the water. Milo held the silver key in both hands the entire drive, his thumbs moving slowly across its surface, not nervously, deliberately. Like a child memorizing the feel of the last thing his mother gave him before passing it forward. How long have you had it? Evelyn asked. Since last year, Milo said. My grandma had it. She said Mom told her to keep it until I was old enough to know what to do with it. She said Mom said I would know, that I would feel when it was time. Did you know when it was time? Milo thought about it. When I found out you were getting married, he said. Mom always talked about this family, not by name, not everything, but she talked about them. She said the people who hurt her were connected to someone called Nathan Ashford. He looked up. She never said he was bad. She said it was complicated. But she said if this family ever got close to you, someone needed to find you. She knew I would end up near them. She said you had a connection to Nathan already, that it was going to become something. She said she prayed it would not. But she wanted someone ready in case it did. Evelyn looked at the rain on the window. Clara had known that Evelyn, who had come so close to the orbit of this family, might one day find herself at the center of it. Had prepared for it. Had trusted her son to deliver the preparation. That was either the most extraordinary act of planning Evelyn had ever encountered, or the act of a woman so completely in love with the people she was trying to protect that her love had become indistinguishable from foresight. Maybe both. The facility's night receptionist let them in with a look of mild confusion at the group of people arriving in evening clothes at this hour. The hallways smelled of cold concrete and old air. The strip lights above flickered once and held. Row 200, locker 214. Warren found it first. He stepped aside and looked at Milo without saying anything. The communication was clear. This belongs to you. You should be the one. Milo stepped forward. He stood in front of the locker. He looked at it for a moment, then he put the key in the lock. His hands were shaking, not the frightened kind, the kind that happens when the body understands the size of a moment before the mind has finished processing it. Evelyn placed her hand on his shoulder. He did not shake it off. He turned the key, the lock released, the door swung open, and Clara filled the room. It was not dramatic the way stories like this are supposed to be. No glowing light, no overwhelming weight, just a metal room 2 meters deep and 1.5 wide, filled with boxes and drives and folders and years. Clara's years. Clara's precision. The particular quality of a mind that loved the work so much it brought the same care to its final project that it would have brought to anything. The boxes were labeled in her handwriting. Small, upright letters tilting slightly to the right. She always said that was the sign of someone who was always leaning toward the next thing. Always moving forward. Each box dated, each one cross-referenced with a color-coded sticker system. Blue for financial records, red for cross-references, yellow for correspondence, green for what she had titled, in her own words, things they tried to make disappear. It communicated to everyone standing in that corridor looking into the locker that every single thing inside had been placed there by someone who intended for it to be found, understood, and acted upon. Not buried, not hidden for hiding's sake. Stored with purpose for the moment it would be needed. Warren opened the first box with latex gloves and read in silence for 90 seconds. Then he looked up with the expression of a man who has been swimming toward something for 7 years and has just touched land. These are originals. Financial records, transfer documents, private meeting minutes from 3 of the foundations. Some predate the digital copies by 3 months, created before the digital versions were later deleted. They cannot be dismissed as recreations. How many investigations would this reopen? Nathan asked. Minimum 8, Warren said. That is based on first review. There may be more. 8 investigations. 8 sets of families. 8 cases closed without answers. 8 moments when the machinery of justice had been persuaded to stop and had left behind only silence and the grief of people who were never told the full truth. Margaret sat down on the concrete floor outside the locker. No one had said anything to her. She simply reached the point where standing was no longer available to her. I did not know the extent of it, she said. I knew certain things were being handled in ways that were not right. I did not know about the children. I was told it was financial fraud. I told myself that was different. But you knew enough to stay silent, Nathan said. Yes. You knew enough to protect Charles. I was protecting your father. I told myself I was protecting your father. Clara Osei had a child, Nathan said. And she is dead. Whatever you were protecting, the result is the same. Margaret did not argue. Milo moved through the boxes slowly, trailing his fingers along Clara's labels, reading her handwriting. He stopped at the far end, the last box. A photograph was sitting on top of it, facing outward, facing the door, facing whoever came in, waiting. Like it had been positioned with absolute intention, like Clara had placed it there last, knowing it was the first thing that mattered. Milo picked it up. Clara, smiling, holding a baby, eyes bright, the yellow dress, that laugh beginning in her whole body. Looking directly at the camera with the expression of a woman who knows exactly what she has and exactly what it is worth and is not afraid of either. Written in fading ink across the bottom, if anything happens to me, tell Milo I tried to stay. Milo held the photograph against his chest. He cried, not loudly. The real kind, quiet and deep. The kind that comes from a place that does not require sound to be felt. The kind that happens when you have been waiting a long time for the confirmation of something you already knew, and when it arrives, it is both relief and devastation in the same breath. Evelyn sat down on the floor beside him, on the cold concrete, in the last place Clara's hands had touched before she died. And she stayed. Warren found the sealed envelope at the bottom of the third box. White, unremarkable, but Clara's handwriting on the front gave it the weight of a final declaration. Private. For whoever opens this locker, do not open unless something has happened to me. Nathan opened it. Inside were 3 items. A DNA paternity test report from a private laboratory dated 11 months before Clara died, a set of sealed hospital records, and a handwritten letter, several pages, folded in thirds, the paper soft from being refolded many times, the creases worn pale. Nathan read the DNA report first. His face changed in stages: confusion, processing, understanding, then the particular stillness of a person absorbing something so enormous that the body simply stops moving while the mind catches up. He turned the report around, held it toward Evelyn. She read the names. Maternal, Clara Oze. Child, Milo Oze. Putative father, Richard Ashford. Paternity probability, 99.997%. Result, paternity confirmed. The storage facility was completely silent. Milo looked between them, reading the shift in the room the way he read everything, completely, accurately, without the filtering layer adults apply to protect themselves from conclusions. What does that mean? He asked. Nathan set the report down. He looked at Milo for a long time, the way you look at someone when you are seeing them for the first time and the last time simultaneously. He searched Milo's face. The eyes, the line of the jaw, the way the brow furrowed when he was thinking, the shape of his hands. He found what he was looking for. He recognized his own father in the 9-year-old boy standing in this storage locker in a coat that was too large for him. It means, Nathan said carefully, that Richard Ashford was your father. Milo held the information, the way he held everything, with care, with time. Nathan's father, Evelyn added softly. Which makes Nathan your brother, Milo said. He looked at Nathan. Nathan looked at him. Something quiet and enormous passed between them in the concrete corridor under the flickering fluorescent light. Something that did not need words. Does that mean I have family now? Milo asked, his voice completely steady. The steadiness of a child who has been asking this question his entire life and is not sure whether to prepare for another disappointment or allow himself to believe the answer might finally be yes. From outside the locker, Margaret made a sound with no name. Nathan knelt in front of his brother, got down to his level, eye to eye, the level of a man choosing to make himself small enough to be trusted. Yes, Milo. His voice did not waver. You have family now. He opened his arms, and the boy who had walked into a wedding ceremony alone, in a coat that did not fit, carrying a silver key and 7 years of his mother's truth, stepped forward into the arms of his brother. And something in the story stopped moving toward destruction, and began, slowly, carefully, with all the fragility of things that begin after long damage, to move toward something else. He arrived the way people arrive when they have decided they have nothing left to lose. Quietly, without performance. Warren received a message and his expression shifted, not surprise, but recognition. The expression of a man who has been in this work long enough to no longer be shocked by what people do when the walls close in. He's outside, Warren said. Who? Nathan asked. Charles Ashford. Margaret closed her eyes. Evelyn pulled Milo closer. Charles Ashford walked in 2 minutes later, alone. Older than expected. Thinner. His hair had gone completely white. His face carried the gray, permanent exhaustion of a man who has been carrying something enormous for a very long time and has never found a way to put it down, because putting it down would require the kind of reckoning he has been avoiding. He looked at Warren first, then Nathan. Then Margaret, who looked at the floor immediately. Then his eyes moved to Milo. And they stopped. He looked at the boy for a long moment. Really looked. What moved across his face was not what Evelyn had braced herself for. Not arrogance. Not calculation. Not the cold authority of the voice on the recording. Recognition. And underneath it, barely visible, barely admitted even now, grief. You should have stayed hidden, Warren said. I was not safe, Charles said. I was simply not found yet. There is a difference. He looked at Nathan. I came because I knew that if the locker had been opened, everything that comes after would happen with or without me. I would rather be part of what comes after than wait somewhere for someone to come for me while knowing it is coming. So you decided to cooperate, Nathan said. Yes. Nathan looked at his uncle with the expression of someone who has known a person their whole life and is meeting them for the first time. Tell me about the lake house, Charles told them. He arrived after Richard, after Margaret, who had come to manage her husband, to stand between his guilt and its consequences, the way she had always tried to stand between Richard and the worst of himself. Richard had been attempting to negotiate, offering Clara things, financial security, relocation, a new identity. Clara had refused all of it. Not angrily, with complete clarity and the exhaustion of someone who has already decided what they are going to do. She told your father that what she had found was too significant to bury, Charles said. That there were families waiting for answers only she could give them. That no amount of personal security was worth more than that. And that was when you arrived. Yes, he looked at Milo. I told her that no child would survive if the story became public. I meant that the people I was protecting had the resources and the willingness to harm anyone connected to it. I was not making an idle threat. I was telling her the truth about what she was dealing with. You scared my mom to death, Milo said. The sentence was not a metaphor. It was a statement of cause and effect. Yes, Charles said. She ran. She was trying to reach her car, in the storm, at night, toward the water. He stopped. I did not touch her. I have said that to myself a great many times. It has never made me feel any better about what I did do. He reached into his coat pocket. Everyone tensed. But what he removed was a small black flash drive. He placed it carefully on top of Clara's boxes, on top of everything she had documented, his contributions sitting on hers. The names above mine, he said, the people I was protecting, the full network, everything Clara was building toward, she was going to get there. I delayed it. I did not prevent it. He looked at Nathan. Your father spent the last 2 years of his life trying to find a way to undo what he had done. He ran out of time. Like you, Nathan said. Like me, Charles agreed. Warren's colleague appeared at the corridor entrance. Charles Ashford held out his hands. He did not resist. He did not look back. The corridor door closed behind him, and the only sound left was the rain on the roof above. Still falling. Still patient. Like it had been waiting the whole time for the truth to finish arriving. Warren unfolded the letter. He looked at Milo first. Your mother wrote this for whoever found the locker. She asks that it be read aloud. Milo nodded. He was sitting on the concrete floor, back against the wall, the photograph in his lap. He had been holding it since he picked it up. He would hold it for the rest of the night. Warren began to read. And from the first line, everyone in that corridor understood why Clara had written it to be spoken. Because her voice was in the words, the cadence, the particular rhythm of a woman who thought in complete sentences and felt no obligation to be brief about anything that mattered. To whoever finds this, if you are reading this, something happened to me before I could get to you myself. I am sorry about that. Not for what I found. Not for what I tried to do with it. Just for the inconvenience of not being there to hand it over properly, with a full explanation and a cup of tea and the opportunity to answer your questions in real time. I was very much looking forward to that version. Milo made a sound. Half a laugh. The involuntary kind. The kind that comes when something is so completely and precisely the person you are grieving that for 1 second they are entirely present again. Their voice. Their exact voice. To Milo, my love. You are 9 years old when this is read, or thereabouts. Old enough. You have always been old enough. You were born old, in the way of children who arrive into difficulty and choose to understand it rather than pretend it away. You get that from your grandmother partly. You also get it from your father, whoever he turns out to be. Nathan looked at the floor. I found out about your father late, later than I should have. I made decisions about what to do with that information that were not perfect. I chose to use it as protection rather than as connection, because I was afraid that connection would draw attention to you, and you were the one thing in the world I was not willing to risk. The work I was doing in the last 2 years of my life was not fun. You know that, because you were there. You saw the late nights. You saw the papers on the kitchen table. You saw me cry sometimes when I thought you were asleep. You always pretended you were asleep. You were not. I know you were not. Milo smiled, a small, unguarded, completely genuine smile. The smile of a child caught in a kindness. I need you to know that every hour of it was worth it. Not because I was heroic. I was not. I was frightened a great deal of the time. But there were families out there, real families, waiting for answers that only I had. And I could not live with myself if I buried those answers to protect my own comfort. You are going to grow up into a world that is slightly more honest than it would have been without this. That is not nothing. That is in fact everything. Take care of yourself. Eat properly. Argue with your grandmother about music. She needs the practice. And know that every single choice I made in the last year of my life was made with you at the center of it. I love you more than I know how to say in a letter, but I have tried. Warren turned the page. His voice had remained steady throughout, the steadiness of a professional who has chosen this work and understood what it requires. His eyes told a different story. To Evelyn, and I know you are in that room, because I know you. I know you will have found your way back to this, even if it took you the full 7 years. You are not a coward. You were scared. Those are different things. Cowards decide they were right. Scared people come back. I am counting on you, coming back. Evelyn closed her eyes. Tears fell quietly down her face. I never blamed you for leaving the lake house. I want that said clearly and on record. You called the police. You stayed on the phone with them. You reported everything you had seen. What happened after that was not in your power to prevent. Fear makes people abandon things they love. This is not a character flaw. It is a feature of being human and knowing what you stand to lose. The important thing is not where you went, it is where you end up. Please end up in the right place. And please be kind to Milo. He is going to be fine. He is going to be better than fine. But he is also 9, and 9 is hard enough without losing the person who was supposed to be in your corner. You were always in my corner. Even when you were frightened, I could feel it. Please be in his. Warren set the letter down. He folded it carefully and placed it back in the envelope. Nobody said anything. The storage locker, the rain on the roof, the photograph in Milo's hands, the silver key on the floor beside him, the boxes, Clara's handwriting on every label, everything she had built in the hours after her son was asleep to give the truth a place to wait. Milo stood. He walked to Evelyn. He said nothing. He simply wrapped his arms around her the way children do when they have decided to trust someone. Completely. Without conditions. Without the careful hedging adults build into every gesture of love. Just, completely. Evelyn held him, the way she had held him in that hospital corridor 9 years ago, the way she had been holding the memory of holding him for 7 years. She told me you'd be here, Milo said. I should have been here a long time ago, Evelyn said. Milo thought about this for a moment, with the particular thoughtfulness of a child who does not give answers until he has checked them. Then he said, quietly, simply, "But you came." 3 words. Delivered without anger, without conditions, without the requirement that she be someone other than who she was. Just the truth. Spoken by a 9-year-old boy who had crossed a city alone in a coat that did not fit, carrying a silver key, and 7 years of his mother's truth. And found exactly the person his mother said he would find. Exactly where she said he would find her. In the right place. Finally. They left the storage facility just past 4 in the morning. The storm had stopped. It had stopped sometime while they were inside, gradually, without announcement, the way storms end when they have finally done what they came to do. The city outside was wet and quiet. Streetlights reflected in every surface, the roads glistening, everything looking slightly more significant than it usually does at 4 in the morning. That particular quality of the world in the hours before dawn, when it is just cleaned and rested and not yet full of the noise of itself. Milo fell asleep on the drive back. Leaning against Evelyn in the back seat, the coat still too large, bunched around him, his breathing slow and even, the photograph still in his hands. Evelyn looked at him sleeping and thought about Clara holding him as a newborn. Thought about a yellow kitchen and takeout containers and bad films on Friday evenings and the laughter that came out of nowhere and did not require a reason. Thought about a boy who had woken up that morning, got himself dressed, put on a borrowed coat, and walked into a church full of strangers to ask a question nobody wanted asked. Because his mother had trusted him to. Because his mother had spent the last year of her life making sure that when the moment came, he would know what to do. She raised him right, Evelyn thought. Whatever was taken from her, however early and unjust the taking, Clara Osei got that completely right. 3 months after the wedding that was not a wedding, Charles Ashford was charged with conspiracy to intimidate a witness, perverting the course of justice, and 4 additional charges connected to the network. He entered a guilty plea on the primary charges. The flash drive he had left on top of Clara's boxes contained the names of 11 individuals above him in the network. Investigators in 3 countries began working from those names within the week. 6 historical missing persons investigations were formally reopened. 2 produced significant new leads within 30 days. The families of the missing children were contacted. Some of them had been waiting 7 years for that call. Some had been waiting longer. All of them received what Clara had always intended for them. Not a conclusion necessarily, not a neat ending. The truth does not always end neatly, but the understanding that someone had looked for the answers on their behalf, that someone had paid a very high price for that looking, that the price had not been wasted. Clara had documented every case with the same precision she brought to everything. Names, dates, cross-references, evidence assembled so carefully and so clearly labeled that investigators could follow it without needing to be told where to look. Because she had planned for the possibility that she would not be there to tell them. Because she was that kind of person. Margaret Ashford cooperated fully with investigators. She provided testimony about Richard's involvement and about the communications she had been party to. She moved to a smaller house in the countryside outside the city. Nathan visited her, at first reluctantly, then with a consistency that surprised him and eventually stopped surprising him. She was still his mother. What she had done and what she had failed to do were both true. He did not resolve this. He carried both. Milo met her twice. The second time, she made him lunch and said nothing particularly meaningful, and he ate 2 sandwiches and sat in the particular comfortable silence of a child who has decided not to need a situation to be different than it is. It was, Nathan reported later, the most functional conversation he had witnessed all year. Nathan and Evelyn did not get married. They did not stop speaking to each other either. They became something without a neat name. Dinner every few weeks. Long phone calls. The kind of honesty that only survives between people who have seen each other at their worst and decided to remain in the vicinity anyway. Whether it became something more was a question neither of them was trying to answer quickly. Neither had any appetite for decisions made in the aftermath of extraordinary things. They had both learned, in the clearest possible terms, what the cost of decisions made from fear could be. They were taking their time. Milo lived with his grandmother. Clara's mother, Abena, a woman from Accra who had raised Clara alone after Clara's father died young, and who had subsequently approached the project of raising Milo with the fierce, warm, completely unsentimental love of someone who knows what it costs and has decided to pay it anyway. She spent 3 days being carefully suspicious of Evelyn before inviting her to dinner. Evelyn arrived on time with a bottle of wine she had researched for 3 days. Abena looked at the bottle, said nothing, and poured tea. The jollof rice that followed was the best Evelyn had ever eaten. She said so. Abena received this information with the complete absence of surprise of someone who has known it for decades and has never required external confirmation. Evelyn had been to that table 7 times now. Milo sent her messages at random intervals, usually to share something he had learned, or to ask her opinion on something completely unrelated to any of this. What is the fastest land animal in the world? Do you think pineapple belongs on pizza? What does the word complicit mean? That last one arrived on a Tuesday afternoon and sat in Evelyn's chest for the rest of the day. She looked up the dictionary definition. She wrote a very careful answer. Involved in wrongdoing, even through silence, even through choosing not to act. She sat with it for a long time after she sent it. He replied, "Okay, the X." And then, a minute later, "Grandma says dinner Sunday if you want." And then, 20 seconds after that, "I want." Evelyn wrote back, I'll be there. She was. The silver key was in a small frame on Milo's bedroom wall. He had asked to keep it, and nobody had any reason to say no. Clara's photograph was beside it, the one from the locker, the yellow dress, the laugh beginning in her whole body. If anything happens to me, tell Milo I tried to stay. She tried with everything she had, and when she could not stay any longer, she left behind the most carefully constructed argument for truth anyone in that story had ever seen. Boxes in a locker, a key in a boy's pocket, a letter addressed to the scared friend she had already forgiven before she even needed to. Clara Osei understood something that took everyone around her years to learn. The truth does not need to be present to do its work. It just needs to be stored somewhere safe. Somewhere the right person knows how to find it. Even if it takes 7 years. Even if it arrives in a church during a wedding, carried by a 9-year-old boy in a coat that is too large for him. Even if the people who finally receive it are not the people who deserve to carry it alone all this time. Clara Osei built something that could not be destroyed, and the son she raised with her whole heart delivered it, exactly as she knew he would. In the end, in the cold storage room at 4 a.m, with the truth finally breathing free, and the storm gone and the city quiet around them, Clara Osei won. She always was going to. Some people are simply built that way, and the children they raise carry it forward, into the world, where it belongs.